you ever found yourself wondering, why won't they just stop? Why do they seem to protect the eating disorder? Or why does it feel like they're pushing help away? You're not alone. And these are questions that are often come up from a place of fear, confusion, and wanting things to get better. But what's happening underneath an eating disorder is often far more complex than it appears on the surface. Because eating disorders are not just about food, and understanding that can completely change the way we respond. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm Jane and I'm a carer of someone living with an eating disorder and also one of the founders of Nourish to Flourish. Today we're going to talk about something many people struggle to make sense of, and that is why eating disorders can be so hard to let go of, even when they're clearly causing harm. And honestly, this can feel heartbreaking, it can feel confusing, and at times incredibly frustrating. And what I hope today will do is gently shift the way we understand what's happening underneath, because it isn't about blame. It's not about anyone doing something wrong, and it's not about getting things perfect. It's about understanding. And when understanding changes, the way we respond often changes too. I've seen firsthand how confusing and confronting this journey can be. There's been many times when I didn't know what to say or what to do. And this presentation comes from that place. It comes from lived experience, learning, reflecting, researching publicly available resources, and trying to understand. It's not a substitute for professional medical or mental health advice. Please take what is helpful for you and leave what isn't. And remember, take care of yourself and seek support from a qualified professional if needed. The aim of today is simple, but really important. It's about building understanding, because without understanding, it's very easy to feel stuck in frustration or fear. It's about reducing stigma. Eating disorders are often deeply misunderstood, and that misunderstanding can sometimes lead to responses that unintentionally make things harder. And it's also about encouraging compassion for the person who is struggling, and also compassion for yourself as a carer. Because this journey, it's not easy. And when we begin to understand what's happening underneath the behaviours, something shifts. We move away from reacting and towards responding. And even small shifts in understanding can make a meaningful difference over time. I just want to start off with some questions that you may be thinking, and I can tell you I definitely was thinking. You might be wondering to yourself, why don't they just stop? Why do they keep defending it? Why does it feel like they're choosing this? And you know what? These questions are so common, and they often come from a place of wanting to get things better. They come from our fear, from frustration, and just feeling helpless. Sometimes they come from watching someone you love struggle so much and not knowing how to reach them. And I just want to say, having these thoughts does not make you a bad person. I've had them. Many people have had them. It just shows that we're human. But the answers to these questions are often not what they seem on the surface. And that's what we're going to start to unpack today. One of the most important things to understand is that eating disorders are not really just about food. They're not simply about weight, appearance, or what someone is or isn't eating. Those are the things we can see, but underneath there is so much more going on. Eating disorders are complex mental health conditions, and for many people, they actually serve a purpose. And one of the biggest mindset shifts for me throughout our journeys was truly understanding that. Because from the outside, it was easy to focus on the food. We could see what she was not eating. We could see the behaviours around the meals. We could see the weight changes. So it makes sense that we go there. I remember thinking, if we could just fix the food, surely things will get better. But what I've come to understand is this, that food is often just the surface. And underneath that, there is a complex mix of emotions, thoughts, and coping strategies. Eating disorders are deeply connected to how someone's trying to manage their world. And importantly, that eating disorder often serves a purpose, not in a helpful way, not in a long-term way, but in a way that feels helpful in that moment. So for many people, the eating disorder becomes a way of coping with things when they're really overwhelming. It's a way of feeling some sense of control when life feels a bit uncertain. And it's also can be a way to manage emotions that just feel too big and too intense and too hard to sit with. Sometimes it can also be a way to numb feelings and to avoid distress and create structures when everything else feels really chaotic. So when we focus on only the food, we can unintentionally miss what's actually driving the behaviour. And that's why sometimes even when food improves for a while, the struggle's still there. Because the underlying need hasn't actually been addressed. And this is where compassion begins to grow, because instead of seeing stubbornness or defiance, we start to see something else. We start to see someone who's trying to cope. They're trying to cope in a way that they only currently know how to. And that changes how we respond. It doesn't make it easier, but it helps us understand. For many people, the eating disorder is not just something that's happening to them, it's actually something that is like helping them. And I know that can feel a bit confusing and confronting to hear as a carer, because from the outside, we can actually see that it's harming them. We can see the impact on their health, we can see the strains on their relationships, and we can also see how it's starting to take over their life. But from the inside, it can feel very different, because for some people, it's safety. It's something that's predictable in a world that feels overwhelming. Sometimes it can be a feeling of control because they can actually hold on to it when everything else feels uncertain. And for some, the eating disorder can actually be a form of comfort because it's a familiar pattern that they can return to when things are feeling really hard. And sometimes it's even protection. Protection from emotions that are really intense. Protection from situations that feel unsafe or from things that they don't yet have the tools to face. So even when the consequences are harmful, even when part of them might recognize that something isn't right, another part of them can still feel like it's serving as an important role. And this is when the internal conflict begins. Because letting go of the eating disorder isn't just about stopping behaviours. It can also for them feel like letting go of safety, letting go of control, or letting go of the one thing that's been helping them to cope. And that's terrifying. And I think this is one of the hardest things for us to understand from the outside, because we're looking at the harm, but they're feeling the function. And when we can hold both of these things at the same time, that is harmful and that it serves a purpose, that's when our the responses can start to shift. So we can start to shift from frustration to understanding, from trying to take it away to trying to understand what it's actually doing for them, and how we can support them feel safe without it. And that's where the real support begins. When we start to look a little deeper, we can begin to understand why the eating disorder can feel so protective. Because it's not random, it's not just a behaviour for the sake of it. It's often meeting very real emotional needs. For some people, the eating disorder becomes a way of coping with things that feel too overwhelming, too big, or even too hard to process. So, for example, it can help someone avoid emotions that feel unbearable. Things like sadness, anxiety, fear, shame, or even anger. If those emotions feels too intense to sit with, then the eating disorder can act as a distraction, or it can be a way to push those feelings away. It can also create a sense of achievement or success, especially if someone's feeling like they're struggling in other areas of their life. They might be thinking, this is something I'm good at. This is something I can control. This is something I can succeed in. And that can be really powerful. It can also numb emotional pain, almost like turning the volume down on feelings that feel too loud. Giving them a break, even if it's only temporarily. And for some, it creates structure. It's rules, routines, predictability. And when life feels so chaotic or uncertain, that structure can feel incredibly grounding. So when we look at it from the outside, these behaviours can feel really confusing to us. They can feel frustrating, sometimes even frightening. We might be thinking, why would you keep doing something like this that's clearly hurting you? But from in the inside, it can feel very different. It can actually feel necessary. It can feel like the thing that is helping them get through the day. And when something feels necessary, letting go of it is just as hard, even if it's unsafe. And that's why change doesn't happen just by telling someone to stop. Because we're not just asking them to stop a behaviour, we're asking them to actually let go of something that feels like it's protecting them. And when we understand that, we can respond with more patience, more empathy, and less frustration. Okay. This is where things are becoming really complex, because this is where there's lots of misunderstanding. Because from the outside, it can sometimes look like a choice. It can look like they're not trying, or that they don't want to get better, or that they're actually choosing it. But what I've come to understand is that it's not that simple at all. For most people living with an eating disorder, there's ongoing internal conflict happening. It's almost like two parts of them are pulling in opposite directions. So one part of them might be knowing that this is hurting me, I'm tired, I don't want to live like this, and I want things to be different. But then there's the other part that is doing pretty much the exact opposite. It's actually saying, I need this. I don't feel safe without this. I don't know who I am without this. If I let go of this, everything is going to fall apart. And that part is just as real as the first part. So they can be holding both of these experiences at once. They might be wanting change, but on the other hand, fearing it. They might recognize that it's harming them, but on the other hand, needing it to cope. And that creates constant push and pull inside them, a battle that we often don't see, but they are living with every single day of their life. And that battle is exhausting, emotionally, mentally, and physically. It's not a lack of motivation, it's not stubbornness, and it's not being difficult. It's someone trying to navigate two very powerful conflicting needs. They need to get better and they need to feel safe. And when we start to understand this, it can change how we actually respond, because instead of us seeing resistance, we can start to see the struggle. Instead of seeing refusal, we can actually start to see the fear. And that allows us to meet them with more compassion and a little bit more patience in those really hard moments. The one way that I thought really helped me understand what was going on internally for my loved one was to think about the eating disorder as a separate voice. It's not the person themselves, but something that is influencing their thoughts, their feelings, and behaviours. And you might think I'm a bit cuckoo and whatever, but please hear me out on this one. So that internal voice, it's often not kind. It's usually critical, demanding, and it's often driven by fear. It can sound harsh, it can be controlling, and it can be so relentless. And for the person experiencing it, it doesn't feel something like something that they can ignore. It can feel really real. It can feel convincing. And this voice might be saying things like, you need me. You're not safe without me. If you don't listen, something bad's going to happen. This is the only way you can cope. And over time, that voice can become louder, stronger, and more dominant to the point where it can start to drown out a person's own thoughts. So even if part of them wants something different, that voice is still there. It's pushing, it's criticizing, and it's creating fear. And eventually, it can feel like they have to listen to it. Not because they want to, but because not listening feels too unsafe. And this is why challenging the eating disorder can be really difficult, because you're not just asking someone to change a behavior, we're asking them to go against a voice that feels powerful, convincing, and protective. And that takes an incredible amount of courage. It also helps to explain something really important for us as carers, that the person we love is not the eating disorder. The eating disorder is something separate. And when we start to see that, it can really help us to respond differently. We can respond with less blame and more understanding, because often they're not fighting us, they're already fighting something very loud inside of themselves. So when we start to bring all of this together, it begins to make a little bit more sense of why someone might protect their eating disorder, even when we can clearly see the harm, and even when part of them might also know it's hurting them. Because for many people with the eating disorder doesn't just feel like something that they do, it can start to feel like a part of who they are. It can start to feel like it's tied into their identity, into their routines, their sense of self. And it can actually feel like it helps them understand the world around them. And when something becomes that embedded, letting go of it can feel like losing a part of themselves. It can also feel like the only place they have control, especially when life feels really unpredictable or uncertain or even overwhelming. The eating disorder can become the one thing that feels certain, structured, and within their control. And giving this up can feel like stepping into something of complete uncertainty. It can feel safer than facing what's underneath. Because underneath the eating disorder, there are often emotions, experiences, and fears that just feel too big and too overwhelming to face. So the eating disorder acts like a buffer. It's a way of keeping those things at a distance. And when we ask someone to let go of that eating disorder, we're also in a way asking them to face things without any protection. And that's not just difficult, that can actually be terrifying. Not uncomfortable, not inconvenient, but unsafe. And this is the part that can really shift our perspective. Because what might look like resistance from the outside, that pushback, the getting defensive in the shutdown, it's often fear on the inside. It's that fear of losing control, of being overwhelmed, or feeling that fear of not coping. So this isn't about someone being difficult or defiant. It's about someone trying to hold on to those feelings like safety, even when that safety is actually harming them. And when we can understand that, we can meet that fear with more compassion and less frustration. I want to invite you to imagine something with me. So I want you to just take a second and think about something in your own life that helps you cope. It might be something small. It might be something you turn to without even thinking, or something that gives you a sense of comfort or control or relief. Something that helps you get through your hardest days. Now imagine being asked to give that up. Not slowly, not when you feel ready, but being told that you need to let it go. Even if deep down you know it might not be helping you in the long term, it still feels like it's helping you right now. Now imagine what that would feel like. It could feel like losing control. To me, it might be something like feeling I have to give away something that's really important to me. It could mean suddenly being left alone with my emotions. And to be honest, that terrifies me sometimes. It could mean stepping out into the unknown without that thing to fall back onto, without that sense of safety, without that buffer. And for many people that with an eating disorder, that's exactly what letting go of that eating disorder can feel like. Not just stopping the behaviours, but losing something that's been helping them to cope. losing something that has felt like safety. And when we truly sit with that, when we allow ourselves to understand it from that perspective, it actually shifts something within us. Because instead of thinking, why won't they just stop it? We can actually start to think, this must feel really scary. And that shift is incredibly powerful in how we support them. One of the important things that I've learned along our journey is that what we see on the outside is often not the full story. In fact, a lot of the time it's just the surface. Because what we tend to notice are the behaviours. So we might see things like resistance or pushing back when support's offered. We might see refusal of food or help, or we might see anger, frustration, irritability, defensiveness, shutting down, arguing, dismissive concerns, or even denial. The list goes on. And understandably, those behaviours can feel hard to sit with. They can feel confronting, they can feel very personal, and they can feel like we're being pushed away. And it's very easy in those moments to think, why are they doing this? Why won't they listen? Why are they making this harder? But what I've come to understand is that those behaviours are often not the problem. They are actually signals. A signal that something deeper is going on underneath. Because beneath that resistance, there is often fear. Fear of losing control, fear of change, fear of what recovery might mean. Beneath that anger, there's often anxiety. There's feeling overwhelmed. There's feeling of pressure. There's feeling like everything is too much. And beneath that defensiveness, there's often shame. Feeling not good enough, feeling judged, feeling exposed. And beneath it all, there can be a deep sense of being out of control. So what do we see? What we're seeing on the outside is often someone trying to cope. They're trying to cope with something very big and difficult on the inside. And honestly, when we start to see that and see it in that way, it creates an important shift, because instead of reacting to the behavior, we start to respond to the emotion underneath it. And instead of seeing that resistance, we do start to see the fear. And that understanding allows us to respond with more calm, more patience, more compassion, and even in those really hard moments. So the more that we begin to understand the role of the eating disorder, something really important starts to shift. And it's not just in how we see them, but it's how we respond. Because before this understanding, it was very natural to ask those questions that we asked at the start. Why are they doing this? Why won't they stop? Why are they making things harder? And those questions often come from a place of fear, frustration, and wanting to make things better. But the problem is, those questions can keep us stuck. They can keep us focused on the behaviour rather than what's underneath it. But when we begin to understand that the eating disorder is actually serving a purpose, we start to ask a different question. So instead of why are they doing it, we begin to ask, what is this doing for them? What need is being met? What might they be feeling right now? And this shift is powerful because it moves us out of that feeling of frustration into curiosity. And curiosity creates space, a space to pause, a space to listen, a space to understand. And instead of reacting quickly or trying to fix things as we parents like to do, we become more open to what's actually going on for our loved one. And from that place, our responses start to change. We might soften our tone. We might listen a little bit longer without jumping in. We might validate before we problem solve. And these things might seem like little changes, but they can make the biggest difference. Because when someone feels understood, and even if it's just a little bit, it can reduce the need to defend. It can reduce tension, and it can create something really important, which is connection. Connection is such a powerful part of recovery because often the eating disorder thrives in isolation because connection helps gently challenge that. So this shift from frustration to curiosity isn't about getting it perfect. It's about creating more moments where your loved one feels seen and heard and supported. And those moments matter more than you can actually realize. What helps instead? So when we start responding from a place of understanding, something really important changes. We stop fighting the person. And instead, we begin to focus on staying connected to them. Because the person in front of us is not the eating disorder. They are someone struggling with it. And that shift matters. So rather than getting pulled into arguments or power struggles or trying to force change, we gently bring the focus back to our connection. We aim to stay calm, and even when things are really tense, and I know it's not easy, there'll be moments where emotions are so high and everything feels really overwhelming and we're going to be feeling frustrated and scared or helpless. But remember, they are normal feelings. They are normal reactions. But if we can bring ourselves back to a calmer place, even just a little bit, it can help create safety for our loved one. We also need to try and stay curious instead of jumping in with judgment. Curiosity might sound like, I wonder what's going on for them right now. I wonder what this behavior is doing for them. Instead of, this doesn't make sense. Why are they doing this? And again, that shift softens that interaction. It opens the door instead of closing it. We also need to focus on being present rather than trying to fix everything. Because when someone we love is struggling, our instinct is to naturally jump in and try and fix it. We want to jump in when we want to say the right thing, we want to make it better. But often, what they need most of all in that moment is not a solution. It's someone who can sit with them in it. It's someone who doesn't rush them. It's someone who doesn't dismiss or minimize what they're feeling. And sometimes the most powerful things that we can say are actually very simple. And they are, I can see this is really hard. I'm here with you. You don't have to go through this alone. No, these words, they don't fix the situation right there, right then, but they help you build that connection. And then that connection creates that safety. And then that safety is what allows change to happen over time. So we don't need the most perfect words. We don't need to get it right every time. We just need to keep showing up. We need to keep showing up consistently, calmly, and with compassion. Because that presence and that steady support matters more than getting it perfect. I want to just take a moment just to gently remind you from one carer to another that this journey is hard. Not just a little bit hard, but deeply, emotionally, and sometimes overwhelmingly hard. And it's not something that anyone is ever truly prepared for. There's no perfect way to do this. There's no script, there's no manual, there's no set of words that always work. And honestly, there's no version of you that will get it right every single time. There's going to be moments when you're saying the wrong things. There's going to be moments when you react instead of respond. There's going to be moments where you walk away thinking, didn't handle that so well. But that is okay. Because there's going to be moments when you're going to feel really unsure, when you question yourself, where you wonder if you're doing enough, or if you're doing too much, or if you're doing it right, or if you're doing it wrong. And there's going to be moments when it just feels like you're carrying the world on your shoulders. When you feel so tired, so frustrated, and helpless. And I want you to understand this clearly, that those moments do not mean you are failing. They just mean you are a human. They mean you are in the middle of something really difficult and you're doing your best with what you can. Because what matters, it's not that perfection, as I keep saying. It's not about getting every response right. It's not about having the answers. What matters most of all is this: you're learning, you're trying, you're showing up, you're staying, even when it's hard, even when it's really messy, and even when you don't know what to do. And that matters more than the perfection ever could. Because consistent, imperfect, compassionate presence is one of the most powerful things that you can offer your loved one. So if you can take anything away from this moment, let it be, you don't have to be perfect to make a difference. Just be you, do the best that you can, and know being there matters. As we come towards the end, I just want to bring it all back to a few key takeaways. Not to overwhelm you, but just to give you something simple and grounding to hold on to. So eating disorders, they serve a purpose. This is one of the most important shifts, even though we can clearly see the harm for the person experiencing it. The eating disorder is often meeting a need. And that might be helping them to cope, helping them to feel in control or manage overwhelming emotions. And when we understand that, we stop seeing it as just behaviours and start seeing the need underneath it. Another thing is they're not a choice in a way that it appears. So from the outside, it can sometimes look like it's a choice. But when you consider the internal conflict, the fear, and that intense eating disorder voice, it's not a simple decision someone is making. It's often a battle happening inside them between wanting to get better and feeling like they can't. And that's very, very different to choosing it freely. Protection comes from fear and not from defiance. So, what can look like resistance or anger or pushback is often fear underneath. It's that fear of losing control, fear of being overwhelmed, or fear of not coping without their eating disorder. So instead of seeing defiance, we start to see someone trying to protect themselves. Understanding reduces frustration. So when we don't understand, it can easily feel frustrated. We can feel stuck. We can feel like nothing's working. But when we begin to understand what's underneath the behaviour, that frustration often softens. Not because it becomes easier, but because it starts to make sense. And when something makes sense, we can respond with more patience and more compassion. And finally, connection. Connection is one of the most powerful things that we can offer our loved one. Not the perfect words, not the perfect responses, but connection. Staying present, staying calm, and staying alongside them. Because eating disorders, they often thrive in isolation. But connection helps gently challenge that. I remember with my daughter, when I connected with her and when I was curious and asking questions and trying to understand, I used to be like almost poking the bear with the eating disorder. It did not like it. It did not like that I was there, that I was present, that I was curious, and that I was there to support my loved one. It much preferred it when I would walk away. It would much prefer it when I would arc up. It would much prefer it when I was becoming frustrated and overwhelmed. And it liked it when my daughter left those situations and went into isolation. So that safety that we create, it actually allows change to begin. And that change can be slow and it can happen over time. So if everything feels overwhelming, I want you to bring it back to this. I want you to bring it back to understanding, compassion, and connection. If you'd like to learn some more, I highly recommend jumping onto our website by just clicking the link there in front of you. We have a section under the Nourish directory that is called Information from Eating Disorder Lived Experience Perspective. There's lots of different links there to different insights from lived experience individuals. I highly recommend the short film called The Noise. it gives a really good insight into that eating disorder voice. So if you feel like it, jump on and have a look at what we've got to offer. Thank you for joining me and taking time to listen. I truly hope you have found this presentation helpful and meaningful. If you're in the middle of it all and feeling overwhelmed, please be gentle with yourself and take care. Remember, small steps are still steps forward. And most importantly, everyone's journey looks different. There's no one size fits all because everyone's shoe size is different.